Well, first, let me say how much I appreciate the invitation to be with you today at the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce Annual General Meeting. I want to recognize the extraordinary work of the entire team at the Chamber to pull together a virtual version of your AGM. Having shifted all of the Canadian Chambers events to virtual platforms, I can attest to how much work is required to do it. I'd also like to take a moment to thank Chuck Davidson and his team and the board members of the Chamber for your efforts on behalf of the Manitoba business community throughout this past year. It hasn't been easy. And I want to also thank Kyle, who's a great Manitoba representative on the Canadian Chambers Board. Thank you, Kyle, for your time and your efforts representing your province's business interests at our various meetings over the course of the past year. Now, we know that businesses have been struggling to remain open amid this global pandemic. I've seen and heard from entrepreneurs right across the country. I wish I could say that the hard part is over. With the first quarter of 2021 now ended, Canada still faces major challenges. COVID-19 numbers fluctuate, restrictions on our activities remain, the third highly contagious wave continues to wash over us, and we face continued economic uncertainty. Many small businesses in particular have exhausted their cash reserves and have reached their debt limits. Governments at all levels are struggling to balance economic and healthcare concerns with inconsistent results. I believe that the business community has a key role to play. We have a strong stake in protecting the health of our employees and customers, and in speeding the day when we can move away from lockdowns and subsidies to a point where both families and businesses become self-sufficient again. Now, last April, we were quick to put in place the Canadian Business Resilience Network, a hub of information and resources for the whole of the business community. With the CBRN, we formed a collaborative business approach to the pandemic, working together with Canada's leading business organizations. It was important to us that we not try to lay claim to whose members the businesses were, but rather to declare that we're in it together for a fight on behalf of all Canadian businesses. We wrapped up our CBRN activities at the end of this past March because I believe that we're now in a different phase of this pandemic. We now proceed doing business under the banner of a business-led recovery. For us, it's imperative that business leads the way forward. We're all so anxious to recover from this pandemic, physically, emotionally, and economically. So how do we provide the business leadership that Canada so desperately needs? How do we best bring our greatest resources to the table in a constructive way? The most obvious answer is that business people know how to develop strategy and how to get things done. Our job is to develop a business plan to conquer COVID-19. And that's why I was delighted that the Canadian Chamber could use its convening power and bring together the COVID-19 Recovery Leadership Council. Our Council of Canadian Business Leaders will help develop practical solutions to reduce and ultimately eliminate COVID-19 in Canada. This Leadership Council is one important piece of our business-led recovery efforts. Now, while government supports got us through year one of the COVID-19 pandemic with necessary assistance for businesses, for their employees, and for the general population, governments cannot continue to borrow money at the same pace now that we're into year two. We need to get to where both businesses and individuals can become self-sustaining once again. Business will need to do its part. You've probably already started to see this change with businesses and chambers helping implement rapid COVID testing on site and pushing for mobile vaccine clinics. Now, some supports to businesses were and will remain necessary. For instance, we were pleased that at the beginning of March, the federal government extended the federal wage and rent subsidies until June. This type of assistance provides a more sure footing for small businesses that are the faces of communities throughout Manitoba and Canada. We must avoid phasing out support programs too quickly for businesses in the sectors that have been hardest hit, which will take longer to recover. These sectors include tourism, travel, food services, accommodations, and the events sectors, among others. This means extending the wage and rent supports past June until these businesses are able to recover. With tourist attractions running the gamut from the northern lights and polar bears to historic forts, museums and galleries, and provincial and national parks, your communities will understand all too well the impact that COVID-19 has had on the travel for business or pleasure over the course of the past 14 months. Businesses like hotels, meetings and events facilities, and attractions of all kinds have felt the pandemic punch hard, but those secondary institutions that work in and around the tourism sector, restaurants, tour companies, retail, transportation, are reeling as well. We all know that visitors arriving by trains, planes, and automobiles will not be immediate. As I record this message, optimism is growing about the rollout of vaccines across the country. Vaccines are a symbol of hope, and they're a lifeline for so many reasons. It's likely that this process will continue to pick up speed as growing numbers of Canadians are vaccinated. By the first days of fall, most of those who want a vaccine will have received it. We need to focus now on the plan for building a sustainable return to growth for once this happens. Other economies, including the one to our south, will be reopening before Canada's, so we need to lay the foundations for reopening and recovery now. This includes telling investors how we intend to get our finances under control once again. Over the past year, the government had no choice but to provide support for families and businesses to keep them afloat during the pandemic. But our fiscal challenge is now severe. This past year, Ottawa has spent close to 20% of Canada's GDP on income support for individuals and businesses. No other G20 country has come even close to that level of pandemic spending relative to the size of its economy. Over the course of the coming months, governments at all levels will have to differentiate between the need-to-haves and the nice-to-haves. If a program was unaffordable pre-pandemic, it's most assuredly unaffordable now. You need only to look at the main streets of any town in Canada to know that small businesses have been on the front line of the fight against COVID from day one. I've been proud to see how the Chamber network across the country has stepped up to the plate over the past year, and Manitoba is certainly no exception. Throughout the pandemic, the Manitoba Chamber team has been dedicated to communicating with government representatives and other stakeholders about emerging business needs all across the province. Now, most importantly, you've made it your mission to alert your members to resources that could mitigate the devastating impacts of the pandemic and have worked hard on behalf of business throughout the province to ensure that business can continue on the other side of the pandemic. Chuck, you, your team, and the local Manitoba Chamber Network have plugged into our Canadian network to ensure that your concerns were expressed and that our various updates and advocacy wins have helped Manitoba businesses. COVID-19 has and it will continue to shape Manitoba and Canada's economy for years to come. We will not go back to the way things were. We cannot. Now, some positive aspects have come from the pandemic, albeit at a terrible human and economic cost. Canada has adopted nearly a decade's worth of digital transformation in less than a year. This transformation to digital has dramatically changed the nature of work and how businesses reach and interact with their customers. Chambers are conveners and we're connectors. The nature of gathering has changed. In some ways, this is a limitation, but it can also be an opportunity. No longer are we limited by geography. Think of the distances in your own province between the north and the south, the east and the west. The gaps have closed significantly. Technology's ability to dissolve our vast geography means that Canadians, wherever they live, can connect for education, health, business, you name it. The possibilities are endless. I believe that this period of intense transformation is an opportunity to vault Canada to where we need to be during the end game, not to where we were when all of this began. We can't afford to simply build back better. We must build forward so that Canada can take advantage of ways of working and thinking that are new. The purpose of every move we make should be to create a new prosperity for every Canadian, one where we don't simply speak about hope for a brighter future, but where we design our own economic fate. Today, as you reflect on the year that was, and on the 90 years that the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce has operated. I hope you'll also focus on the positives that have come out of this difficult year and over the last 9 decades of service to the businesses of Manitoba. Over the course of the past year, our chamber network has worked together as one connected network, more connected than ever before. The voices of the small businesses that power our communities have been heard. Will the landscape for all of us be changed? Absolutely. Our network was built in partnership with chambers right across the country that stretch across all 10 provinces and 3 territories. The network was built to assist and help grow the prosperity of Canadians and communities like Brandon and Churchill and Flin Flon and Snow Lake that dot the map across the highways and byways of Canada. It's a different era, and now that our network is being called upon to shape the post-pandemic recovery of our communities, we're ready. We look forward to shaping Canada's future with you as our partner.